One last change I'm going to make is put on old glasses that don't dim. Okay. Good morning, Salem. How you doing?
Good afternoon.
If Jay Doobie was here, we would talk about one of his old banker friends I met the other day named Alan Ludke, and he tells me that Jay doesn't do very well playing ping pong. He also taught Jay all that Jay knows about banking, and I said they have a history also playing golf. The inference was that he's a better golf player than Jay. So anyhow, Jay, greetings from Alan Ludke. Okay, this morning we're going to come together and we'll be reading our three lectionary passages. Our first passage, Eric will be reading with us from Ezekiel 37. And then Eric, if you just kind of come up here and look at the little blue dot and read to it.
Okay, so we have today's Old Testament reading, Ezekiel 37, verses 1 through 14.
On the microphone.
The hand of the Lord was upon me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord, and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, O sovereign Lord, you alone know. Then he said to me, Prophesy to these bones and say to them, Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you, and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded. And as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, Prophesy to the breath, prophesy, Son of Man, and say to it, This is what the sovereign Lord says. Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied, as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They say, Our bones are dried up, and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore, prophesy and say to them, This is what the sovereign Lord says. O my people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord. When I open your graves and bring you up from them, I will put my spirit in you, and you will live. And I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done it, declares the Lord.
Glory to God for the people of God, and all people said?
Amen.
Okay. All right, Ellen's going to lead us in a song, Be Thou My Vision.
Number 451. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought, by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence thou my wisdom, and thou my true Lord. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou and thou only, first in my heart. Great God of heaven, my treasure thou art. Great God of heaven, my victory won. May I reach heaven's joys, O bride and son. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all.
And now Owen Eichler will be reading our passage from the book of Psalms. If you want to look it up in the Bible, it would be Psalm 130.
Today's Psalter reading will be Psalm chapter 130. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. O Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to my cry for mercy. If you, O Lord, kept a record of sins, O Lord, who could stand? But with you there is forgiveness, therefore you are feared. I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and it is in His word I put my hope. My soul waits for the Lord, more than watchmen wait for the morning. More than watchmen wait for the morning. O Israel, put your hope in the Lord, for the Lord is unfailing love, and with Him is full redemption. He Himself will redeem Israel from all their sins.
Word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Okay. Dear Father, as we come together this morning, the biggest thing on many of our minds has to do with this coronavirus that is throughout the world and has entered the state of Michigan and is now starting to come into our own geographic area, even Huron County. And Father, we just pray that you will enable us to be wise and, as necessary, to self-confine ourselves, as according to Isaiah 26, verse 20, that we might, at this time, realize it's an opportunity for us to refocus on you and the primary mission and vision you have for our lives, as well as we realize what is not really important, but what is really important, which is you and sharing you with others, being godly examples, not filled with fear, but of faith and wisdom and counsel. Amen. Now we'll now be reading our New Testament passage from the Gospel of John, the entire chapter 23.
Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Jesus loved Martha and her sister Mary and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews tried to stone you, and yet you're going back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees by this world's light. It is when he walks by night that he stumbles, for he has no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I am glad I was not there so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, called Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to comfort Mary and Martha in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know. He will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she told him. "I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who was to come into the world." And after she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been comforting Mary and came with her in the house noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there's a bad odor, for he's been there 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go."
May God give us blessing to the reading of his word. Before I provide today's message, I just would like to bring your attention right to my left in front of the altar rail. We have a number of self-serve communion cups. You just peel off the top section to get the wafer, and then the bottom section to get the grape juice. So if you want to come in this week or next week to take a Holy Communion, you'll be here in front of the communion rail. And if you're looking for a little bit more of an intimate location to partake of Holy Communion for your spiritual strengthening, we also have these units in our prayer room. Dear Father in heaven, Lord, we just pray your anointing on today's message, this last Sunday of Lent prior to Palm Sunday, and we pray that you will give us ears to hear, eyes to see, and your wisdom from above to encourage us as being your faithful witnesses. In Jesus' name, amen. How many of you remember what Lent is? You know, we had Lent start with Ash Wednesday, but I bet with everything going on with the coronavirus, people haven't really been thinking about Lent much at all. Just to remind you, Lent is that time period of 40 days of preparation where we contemplate and look forward and remember Jesus instituting the Last Supper, his dying on the cross on what we call Good Friday, and then his resurrection on Easter or Resurrection Sunday. So that being said, that this is a time of spiritual preparation, I would like to read to you a quote. "This Lent is absurd, but in a certain way, perfect. It harkens back to the 40 days that Jesus spent in the desert fighting the devil. Lent is not about beauty or custom, but it is about the profound mystery of evil, death, and despair that exists, but also about a Lord who is there. We must recognize his presence." The above was written by an Italian bishop named Napoleoni as the coronavirus was causing agony in the lives of thousands in Italy. In the midst of the coronavirus panic in our society in many parts of the world, we can feel like the dry bones that Eric read about as found in Ezekiel 37 that symbolize the house of Israel. Can these bones live? Asks God to Ezekiel. For us today, the question many are asking is similar. Is this coronavirus going to strike my friends, my family, even me? To the despair and fear of sickness and death, God's solution, as we find out in Ezekiel, is his Spirit. His Spirit is pictured in Ezekiel 37 as breath. Spirit and breath are the same word in both the Hebrew Old Testament as well as the New Testament Greek. Note, the word breath or breathe is found 6 times here in Ezekiel 37, 1 through 14. His breath is life. God's breath is life. As the passage proceeds in verses 7 through 11, the bones are reassembled, the tendons, the flesh, the skin all start to clothe the bones. But nonetheless, the bones complain that they are all dried up, that their hope is gone, that they are in despair, they are cut off, they are spiritually dead. But God says he's going to resurrect them, so to speak, bringing them out of their graves and will bring them back to their home, Israel. Fulfillment of this prophecy literally took place when the Jewish people of Europe, who had been in concentration camps under the Nazis, where more half of them, 6.6 million of them, died, were miraculously, so to speak, released and enabled to return to their original native land, Israel. Imagine what it must have been like, must have felt like, to be in a concentration camp for 2 to 3 years. You're starving. You're seeing your friends daily being taken off to be killed in the gas chambers or shot and then burned in the crematoriums. And then suddenly the Allies arrive and they set you free. And then 2 to 3 years later, you find yourself in Israel, your ancient family homeland. Can you imagine the joy of being home? You can breathe again. In today's gospel passage, John chapter 11, we see this seemingly absurdity in the death of Lazarus, a good friend of Jesus. Jesus lets his good friend Lazarus languish, then die of sickness. He doesn't even show up at his funeral. He shows up 4 days after the man's died. Is that any way to treat a friend? Are you asking the same question? Are you feeling the same emotions in the midst of this coronavirus crisis? School closings, store closings, empty shelves at the grocery store, job layoffs, more stores closing, social isolation, deaths worldwide, and then the spreading of the disease creeping up from the Detroit area to us in the thumb. Today I heard we had our first case here in Huron County. Where's God? Does God care? Last week we talked about the Bible's view of plagues being consequences of sin, a means of chastisement, a wake-up call for repentance, and judgment upon the unrepentant. Tough stuff. Hard teaching. The Bible isn't always nice. But let us this Sunday shift to the paradox of us as believers. We believe, but then we question. We struggle with unbelief. We question God's goodness. Why did this happen to me? Why is this happening around us? And that's where this account having to do with Lazarus comes into play. What is notable in the account of Lazarus' death, which Jesus allowed, and then Lazarus' resurrection, are the if-onlys. Words that both are stated explicitly as well as implicitly expressed. So often the word if is one of the weakest words in the Bible as well as in the English language. If looks backward with regret, complaint, and blame. It's used as an excuse not only for handicaps, but also for sins and failures. How many if-onlys do you have in your life if only you'd done something different or didn't mess up? However, as we will see, if is also the strongest word when it is forward-looking, the if of faith. This is faith that believes the promises of God is the only condition for receiving fulfillment. The weak, backward-looking if of if only is a cop-out of responsibility. The strong believing if of faith is a plug-in to the reservoirs of God's power. The weak and the strong ifs stand in sharp contrast in this account of Jesus raising Lazarus. Let's dig into John 11. In verse 8, we see implicit fear and doubt by Jesus' disciples when Jesus, after delaying going to see Lazarus for 2 days, states his intention of going to see him. The disciples worry that the Jews might try to kill Jesus if he does so. Jesus challenges them when he plainly states, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake, I'm glad that I wasn't there so that you might believe. Upon Jesus' arrival, Martha immediately comes up to him saying, if only you'd been here, my brother would not have died. If only is loud and clear in Martha's mindset. Jesus replies, your brother will rise again. Martha, expressing faith in the future, says, I know he'll rise again at the resurrection at the last day. What we see here is Martha dwelling on the past. She's focusing on regret. And then, assured by Jesus that Lazarus will rise again, she focuses on the future. Martha is starting to move from blaming to believing. Jesus wants that for all of us. He wants to take us from being if-onlyers stuck in the past. He wants to take us from being stuck as if-onlyers in the past. Martha is stuck with a past of if-only regret. And a future, if maybe someday Jesus proceeds to want to pull her out of the past and pull her out of the future into the present. When he says, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? John 11:25. Think about all of the I am statements of Jesus in the Gospel of John. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. I am the gate. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the true vine. God always confronts us with the present one. I am, as we experience our present moments. I mean, how basic is Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am. Who did God reveal himself to Moses at the burning bush? He says, tell them, the Israelites in Egypt, I am sent you. That is my name. I am. God is always the present one as we experience. So we need to get out of the past of regret. We need to get out of the whatevers of the future. We need to dwell in the now because God is I am. Then, when Martha's sister Mary, who's probably the more emotional of the two, upon realizing Mary died. We have technological difficulty here. Okay. And the batteries resurrected the microphone. Okay, this is good. So basically the point I left you off with is God, Jesus is I am. He is the one who's present. So we need to get into right now where things are at and realize that God is with us and not dwell on the past or speculate on the future. Now, when Martha's sister, Mary, who's probably more emotional than Martha, upon realizing Jesus has arrived, comes to him, she falls at his feet. And she says, Lord, if only you'd been here, my brother would not have died. Note, Jesus doesn't try to reason with Mary like he did with Martha. Instead, he connects with Mary's feelings. In John chapter 11, verses 33 through 35, we see that Jesus was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. Asking where you laid him. You know, it says where it says he was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. What we're talking about is an emotional reaction that is so deep that literally the person groans with emotion. Soon after that, we see and hear that famous, but the shortest verse in all Scripture, John 11:35, Jesus wept. We see here the door opening into the very heart of God, revealing that He has a caring heart of suffering love. It goes on to say that in verse 38 that Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. So His grieving, His empathy for Mary and Martha, and perhaps by extension to Lazarus, is deeply heartfelt, deeply emotional for Him. So often we falsely image God as unfeeling and remote, when the reaction is He is full of love for us. Why did Jesus speak differently to the two sisters? One thing I've learned over the years is I can speak truth, or other folks can speak truth to me. But unless I know the person who is speaking that truth really cares about me, or they know that I care about them, it really doesn't make any difference. When I know someone really cares about me, I can receive uncomfortable information, correction, and do a total turnaround in my thinking. Jesus lived this truth with both Martha and Mary in ways each could receive. He lives it with us if we let Him. The Lord did this for the dried, complaining bones in Ezekiel, saying, maybe even crying out with deep emotion, "Oh, my people, you will know that I am Lord when I open your graves and bring you up from them. I will put my Spirit in you and you will live." So likewise, Jesus did that with Lazarus. "Take away the stone," He said. Now this is where push to shove comes as to Martha's faith. "But Lord," said Martha, "by this time there's a bad odor, for he's been there for 4 days. 4 days. 4 days. What does that mean? As you may remember from a previous sermon, in Jewish tradition, there was an understanding that a person's soul or spirit hovered around their physical remains for 3 days, and then the 4th day it would leave, never to return. When Ellen and I were in Jerusalem, we went to a place called Gordon's Calvary Tomb, where it's been theorized might have been a burial location for Jesus. And as we looked at that tomb, we saw this little tiny window about this wide, about this tall. And I asked, "What is that little window doing there?" And they said, "That's a soul window." So when the soul finally leaves the body, it can escape out through the soul window. Lazarus had been dead 4 days. Lazarus is dead as a doornail. There's no human possibility of resuscitation. Shock paddles, whatever, nothing's going to work. But what does Jesus say? "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" This is where Jesus challenges Martha's faith. Because remember, Martha, she's the one who's in charge of Lazarus' burial arrangements. Jesus challenges Martha's if only faith. And the good news is Martha acquiesces. Martha chose to believe in spite of logic and her visual reality around her. You know the rest of the story. They took away the stone. Sometimes we have to allow the stone to get rolled away from some of the dirt in our background or subconscious stuff that we've pushed down. Because we think it's going to stink. We don't want to roll away the stone. They roll away the stone. And then Jesus, after praying out loud to the Father so that everybody could hear, so they would stop supporting the if only, negative regret, unbelieving if only, and embrace the positive if of faith, Jesus cries out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." And Lazarus comes out of the tomb, unbound from the grave claws. Lazarus stands before this assembly of mourners, fully alive. Someone once said, Jesus busted up every funeral service he ever attended. Let me seriously ask you, will you choose to believe the if of faith? Will you choose to unite yourself, your fears, your sorrows, your uncertainties to the one who is life? The one who truly understands exactly how you feel. Will you choose to plug your mind and heart into the faith that overcomes all during this unprecedented time in our lives, as well as for always? Where Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we pray a blessing in this hour of coronavirus uncertainty, as well as the various uncertainties and challenges of life. That you would enable us to put our trust in you, so that our spirits may grow calm, that our hearts might be comforted. Lift our eyes beyond the shadows of death, and help us to see the light of eternity right now, in this present time, as well as in the future. Give us grace and strength for this and every time of need. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. That ends the YouTube video.